Hello and welcome. I am Pranay Upadhyay and you are watching Namaste World, your daily window into the biggest stories shaping India and the world. We begin in South Asia. Bangladesh is gripped by fear as deadly attacks on Hindus surge ahead of elections, raising urgent questions over minority safety. In East Asia, China's diplomacy shows a dual strategy, easing East Asian tensions while rebuilding European ties to safeguard its strategic interests. Back in America, Trump's second term is triggering global alarm as bold military moves and threats signal a return to raw power politics. A censored op-ed has gone viral in Pakistan, exposing a deep Gen Z revolt against power, propaganda and silencing. But the biggest news of the day: Iran is on edge as economic protests intensify. Security forces clash with demonstrators and foreign leaders issue sharp warnings. All that and more. Global flashpoints, power plays and stories that matter, coming up in this edition of Namaste World. Tensions are escalating in Iran amid widespread protests over economic hardship, with demonstrators clashing with security forces in cities like Tehran and Fasa, where protesters stormed some government offices and set on fire many establishments. The unrest, fueled by a plunging rial and rising prices from international sanctions, has drawn promises from President Masoud Pezeshkian to review tax hike and address legitimate demands. Meanwhile, Iran's military chief, General Amir Khatami, issued a stark warning today, vowing to cut off the hand of any foreign invader amid threats from the West. US President Donald Trump has backed the protesters, saying America is locked and loaded and ready to intervene if Iran cracks down violently. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu echoed support for the Iranian people's fight for freedom. Senior Iranian official Ali Larijani fired back, urging the United States mind its own business and soldiers' safety. As protests continue, the world watches closely. Bangladesh is facing mounting alarm as a surge of brutal targeted attacks on Hindu minorities, with killings, rapes, arsons and mob violence reported in rapid succession. As the country heads toward its first election since political upheaval, fears are rising at home and abroad, prompting a stark question: is Bangladesh becoming unsafe for Hindus? Here is a report by Sharik Saha.
Is Bangladesh becoming unsafe for Hindus? That question is growing louder after a disturbing surge in violence against the minority community. In just 18 days, 6 Hindu men have been killed, alongside reports of rape, arson, and mob attacks. The latest shock came on January 5th, when 2 Hindu men were murdered within hours. In Jessore, factory owner and newspaper editor Rana Pratap Bairagi was shot in the head and had his throat slit. Hours later, in Narsingri, grocery shop owner Sarat Mani Chakrabarti was hacked with sharp weapons and died on the way to hospital. Just days earlier, a 40-year-old Hindu widow in Janaida was allegedly gang raped, tied to a tree, filmed and blackmailed. The video was later circulated online, deepening the trauma. The violence did not begin this week. On December 18th, factory worker Deepu Chandra Das was lynched by a mob over false blasphemy allegations. His body was later burned and left on a highway. Days later, Khokon Chandra Das was hacked, doused in petrol and set on fire. He died from severe burns. Another Hindu man, Amrit Mandal, was beaten to death by a mob in Rajbari. And in Mymensingh, Bajendra Vishwas was shot dead at his workplace. All this comes as Bangladesh prepares for its first election since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina. Rights groups say extremist influence has grown under the interim administration led by Muhammad Yunus. India has raised concern, and fear is spreading among Bangladesh's Hindus. As elections approach, the pressing question remains: will the violence stop, or is this only the beginning? With Sharik Saha, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
China's latest diplomatic push reveals a carefully calibrated strategy, easing tensions in East Asia while quietly rebuilding influence in Europe. from managing South Korea's strategic balancing act to deepening economic ties with Ireland, Beijing is choosing pragmatism over provocation. But can selective cooperation really protect China's strategic space in an increasingly divided world? Here is a report by Farhan Khan.
China's diplomacy this week tells a clear story. Beijing is working on two very different fronts, managing tensions in East Asia while carefully rebuilding bridges in Europe. Let's start in East Asia, where Chinese President Xi Jinping met South Korean President Lee Jae-myung for the second time in just 2 months. This latest summit took place in Beijing during Lee's first visit to China since taking office, and the first by any South Korean president since 2019. The timing matters. South Korea is walking a tightrope. China is its largest trading partner, its biggest export market, and a crucial source of imports. At the same time, Seoul is a treaty ally of the United States and increasingly aligned with Japan. Two countries whose relations with Beijing have sharply deteriorated.
很高兴在北京同李在明总统先生见面，欢迎你对中国进行国事访问。新年伊始，谨向你和韩国人民致以诚挚祝福。朋友越走越近，邻居越走越亲。作为朋友和邻居，中韩应该多走动，常来往，勤沟通。中方愿同韩方一道，牢牢把握友好合作方向，秉持互利共赢宗旨，推动中韩战略合作伙伴关系沿着健康轨道迈进，切实增进两国人民福祉，为地区乃至世界和平发展。
시진핑 주석님 새해를 맞이해서 우리 중국 인민 여러분 모두의 행복과 건강을 기원합니다. 2달 전 경주에서 만나고 한중 관계의 미래에 대한 깊은 논의를 한 지가 이제 겨우 2달인데 아주 오랫동안 못 만난 분들을 만난 것처럼 참으로 반갑습니다. 지난 수천 년간 한중 양국은 이웃 국가로서 우호적인 관계를 맺어왔고 이제 시대의 흐름과 변화에 발맞춰서 주석님과 함께 한중 관계 발전의 새로운 국면을 열어가고 싶습니다.
So, why does Seoul still need China? Money is one reason. China absorbs a third of South Korea's chip exports and supplies nearly half of its rare earth minerals, which are essential for semiconductors. Beijing is also South Korea's largest source of tourists, and Chinese tech firms like Huawei are positioning themselves as alternatives to US suppliers. But security matters just as much. China remains the only country with real leverage over North Korea. That reality was underlined when Pyongyang fired hypersonic missiles just hours before Lee left for Beijing. At the summit, Lee pressed Xi to help bring North Korea back to dialogue, a task Washington and Tokyo cannot manage alone. The tone was warm. Xi spoke of friendship, history, and frequent communication. Lee echoed the sentiment, but beneath the smiles, the hard issues were largely avoided. Taiwan, China's pressure in the South China Sea, and Beijing's activities in the Yellow Sea. This was deliberate. Seoul wants stability, not confrontation. But the limits are clear. South Korea hosts nearly 28,500 US troops. It's expanding military cooperation with Washington and recently agreed to work with the US on nuclear-powered submarines. No amount of economic cooperation with China can replace that security umbrella. South Korea is hedging, engaging China economically while anchoring itself militarily to the US. Now shift west, to Europe, and a very different kind of relationship. When Xi met Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin in Beijing, the atmosphere was far less tense and far more strategic. Ireland has quietly become one of China's most natural partners in Europe. not because of ideology, but because of economic fit. Ireland excels in high-value manufacturing, especially electronics and pharmaceuticals. In 2024 alone, it exported nearly $5 billion in electrical machinery and $2.3 billion in pharmaceuticals to China. These are precisely the sectors Beijing wants to strengthen as it pushes innovation, digital infrastructure, and healthcare upgrades under its new 5-year plan. This is not dependency, it's complementarity. Ireland brings specialized high-end products developed within global value chains. China brings scale, demand, and application. Each gets what it needs without strategic friction. There's also history at play. She highlighted that both China and Ireland emerged from struggles for independence and modernized through long, patient development. That shared experience underpins the emphasis on mutual respect and long-term cooperation. Ireland's importance goes beyond trade. As an EU member and a future holder of the EU's rotating presidency in 2026, Ireland is well placed to keep China-EU dialogue alive at a time of growing mistrust between Brussels and Beijing. Ireland supports multilateralism, backs the UN system, and maintains an open, rules-based outlook, qualities China now values deeply in Europe. Put together, the contrast is striking. In East Asia, China is managing risk, trying to slow alignment against it, especially as US influence deepens under renewed strategic pressure. In Europe, China is investing in stability, working with pragmatic partners like Ireland to prevent a complete rupture with the EU. Different regions, different tactics. But the goal is the same: protect China's strategic space in an increasingly fragmented world, not through confrontation everywhere, but through selective cooperation where it still works. With Farhan Khan, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
After the dramatic capture of Venezuela's ousted president, US President Donald Trump has signaled a far more aggressive global posture. From Greenland and Colombia to Mexico and Cuba and even Iran, Washington's warnings are growing louder. So after Caracas, who would be Trump's next possible target? Here is a report by Jyoti Shukla.
US President Donald Trump's second term is rapidly turning into a global warning signal. The dramatic overnight raid in Caracas and the capture of Venezuela's president was not just a message to one regime, it was a message to the world. Standing on the wreckage of diplomatic norms, Trump revealed the 1823 Monroe Doctrine, rebranding it the so-called Monroe Doctrine, and reasserting US supremacy over what he sees as America's sphere of influence. And in recent days, Trump has made it clear, Venezuela may only be the beginning. First, Greenland. Trump has openly said the United States needs Greenland for national security, citing Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic.
We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
The island, controlled by Denmark, holds vast reserves of rare earth minerals, critical for modern technology, and sits astride emerging Arctic shipping routes as polar ice melts. But Greenland's Prime Minister has flatly rejected the idea, calling US control a fantasy and warning Washington to respect international law. For now, the rhetoric remains aggressive, even if the ground reality resists it. Then there's Colombia. Just hours after the Venezuela operation, Trump publicly warned Colombian President Gustavo Petro to watch his ass.
He has to watch because, he's got drug factories. They make cocaine in Colombia. And he's no friend of the United States. He's very bad guy. And he's got to watch his ass because he makes cocaine and they send it into the United States of America from Colombia. We love the Colombian people. I love the Colombian people. They're great people, energetic, smart, great. But their new leader is a troublemaker, and he better watch it. He better close up those cocaine factories. They have at least 3 major cocaine factories. We know where they are. He better close them up fast, yeah.
Colombia is rich in oil and minerals and sits at the heart of cocaine trafficking routes. Trump has already imposed sanctions, accused Petro of enabling cartels, and even suggested military action would sound good. This is a stunning turn for a country that has long been one of Washington's closest allies in the so-called war on drugs. Beyond the Americas, Trump's sights extend further. Iran is facing renewed unrest, and Trump has warned that if protesters are killed, the United States will strike hard.
Though there's been protesters killed in Iran, you said we were locked and loaded, ready to go. What is the line there for when the U.S. is going to get involved in those protests?
We'll take a look. We're watching it very closely. If they start killing people like they have in the past, I think they're going to get hit very hard by the United States.
This follows U.S. attacks on Iranian nuclear facilities last year and close coordination with Israel. Despite Iran lying outside Trump's claimed Western Hemisphere doctrine, it remains firmly on his radar. Closer to home, Mexico. Trump has again accused Mexican authorities of failing to stop drugs and migrants, warning that the cartels are very strong and that the U.S. may have to act.
And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it, but unfortunately the cartels are very strong in Mexico.
Mexico's president has categorically rejected any American military operation on Mexican soil, but Trump's language signals growing confrontation. And finally, Cuba. Trump says intervention may not even be necessary because the island is ready to fall.
Cuba is ready to fall.
Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
With Venezuela supplying nearly a third of Cuba's oil, Maduro's removal leaves Havana dangerously exposed. Senior US officials are openly hinting that regime change could be next. From Caracas to the Arctic, from Bogota to Havana, Trump's message is unmistakable. This is not diplomacy, this is power politics. And the world is watching who could be next. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
A censured op-ed has ignited a nationwide reckoning in Pakistan, turning an unknown PhD student into a Gen Z symbol of dissent. As screenshots spread faster than suppression, the article exposed a deep generational rupture between power and youth. Is this viral moment signaling the beginning of Pakistan's quiet Gen Z exit? Here's a report by Srijita Sen Majumdar.
A single article has set Pakistan on fire. On January 1st, the Express Tribune published an op-ed titled "It Is Over" by Zorain Nizamani, a Pakistani PhD student studying criminology in the US. Within hours, the article vanished from the newspaper's website, allegedly on orders from the army. But you know what happens when you try to delete something online? It goes viral. Screenshots of the article exploded across social media. Zorain, virtually unknown until then, became a trending topic overnight and a youth icon in a country notorious for silencing dissent. So, what did he write that was so dangerous? Zorain called out the massive disconnect between Pakistan's ruling elite and its younger generation. He didn't name Army Chief Asim Munir or Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, but his message was crystal clear. Zorain wrote, "For the older men and women in power, it's over. The younger generation isn't buying any of what you are trying to sell to them. No matter how many talks and seminars you arrange in schools and colleges, trying to promote patriotism, it isn't working." He explained that patriotism can't be forced. It comes naturally when there's equal opportunity, sound infrastructure, and systems that actually work. Zorain argued that Pakistan's Gen Z and Gen Alpha are politically aware and see through the propaganda. He wrote, "Despite your best efforts to keep the masses as illiterate as possible, you have failed. They might be a little too scared to speak their minds because they prefer breathing. In Pakistan, speaking up can get you silenced, literally." Zorain summed up the generational clash perfectly. Gen Z wants faster internet, the government wants tighter firewalls. Gen Z wants affordable smartphones, the government raises taxes. Gen Z wants freedom to freelance, the government adds more rules. It's a generation asking for basic rights, while those in power tightening control. The reaction was explosive. Lawyer Abdul Moiz Jafri called it a voice every young person relates to. Activist Mehlaka Samdani warned that censorship only exposes insecurity. Even PTI shared the piece, saying Gen Z sees through corruption and hypocrisy. Zorain later clarified he isn't political. He wrote from personal experience. His mother, actor Fazila Qazi, backed him, calling it a general reflection of youth frustration. But censoring an article about Gen Z rejecting propaganda only proves the point. Suppress it and it spreads faster. This isn't just one article. This may signal a quiet Gen Z departure from Pakistan. No protests, no chaos. Just young people leaving for places where their skills matter and their voices aren't muted. For Pakistan's ruling elite, Zorain's message is clear. It really is over. Gen Z isn't buying what you are selling anymore. With Srijita Sen Mojumdar, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
As we wrap up today's show, here is a quick look at the top stories making waves around the world. Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado says she should absolutely lead her country after Maduro's ouster, praising Trump's role despite his refusal to back her. Japan has sharply condemned China's ban on dual-use exports, warning that widening curbs on rare earth could seriously disrupt industries and escalate regional tensions. Pakistan and Bangladesh are discussing a potential JF-17 fighter deal, signaling warming defense ties as Islamabad expands arms exports and Dhaka recalibrates regional relationships. And that brings us to the end of today's edition of Namaste World, from breakthrough in technology and business to political developments and natural disasters. Stay tuned as we bring you the latest updates, key developments and more from New Delhi to New York. See you again tomorrow, same time, right here on Namaste World.